You need to try these 8 homemade candy bar recipes. First up, homemade Twix bars. Now to begin, we need to make the shortbread cookie base. And so this is just a basic 4 ingredient shortbread. And so I'm going to take my food processor here. And you do not have to do this in a food processor. You can do this by hand with like a pastry blender and in a bowl. So you do not need a food processor. I'm going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 176 Celsius. Now I'm going to add 1/2 cup of butter plus 3 tablespoons. And this is softened butter. Add that to the food processor. And then 1/2 cup of white granulated sugar. I'm just going to put this on and give it a good pulse. And now we're going to add, this is 2 cups of all-purpose flour. You could also use cake flour. Don't use self-rising flour. And then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to go and scrape the sides here. And now put this back on and we'll give it a pulse. And we'll turn it on low. Turn it on low and we're going to mix this until it develops. It'll look like damp sand. And then just come in here and give it a good scrape again. Okay, and this is just a basic shortbread cookie. I'm gonna remove that. And if you are doing this in a bowl, you'll use a pastry blender or like a fork and you'll just mix it all together. And now I have these mini bread loaf pans. And you can use larger ones if you want. I just kind of like the size that it makes when I cut these up. But you could use a much larger pan if you want. And then I sprayed these mini loaf pans with cooking spray. And now we want to put in our base. And when I'm filling these up, normally what I'll do is I'll come in here with a tablespoon and I'll just put 1 scoop there, 1 scoop in that one, and then I'm going to just kind of equally spread out. All right, once you have it all equally in these little pans, I'm going to take my spoon and I'm going to just press it down really, really well. Just pack that shortbread base down. Put these in the oven and we're going to bake these for 12 to 15 minutes until it gets lightly golden brown on top. You don't want to bake it too long, so don't get it too brown because then the base will be super crumbly. So just till it's slightly golden brown on top, onto that step. And when they come out of the oven, they'll look something like this, a little bit blonde in color. And these wound up taking about 17 to 18 minutes. The time will just depend on your oven. All right, now we're gonna let these cool for 30 to 45 minutes until they cool completely. Once the shortbread cookie base has time to cool, what we want to do now is melt the caramel. And I have about 11 ounces of caramel here, and I just got a bag of the 11-ounce bag of the Kraft brand individually wrapped caramels, but you could use pretty much whatever brand of caramel that you want. So what I want to do is I'm going to add about 1.5 tablespoons to 2 tablespoons of cream. You could also use milk, whole milk. I'm going to just melt this in the microwave on bursts of 25-30 seconds and stirring, etc. until it melts. You can also do the double boiler method with this on the stovetop. All right, and once it is melted, what we want to do is I'm going to kind of do the same method as I did before. Just take a spoonful and make sure to get at least 1 spoonful of caramel on each one of these. And you can always buy extra caramel if you want and use a little bit more caramel than I'm using. Once you have the caramel in there, we're going to put these in the refrigerator and let them chill for about an hour. we want to make sure that the caramel gets really cold. Once the caramel top has had a chance to cool and set, again, it'll be about an hour in the fridge. Time to melt the chocolate, and we're gonna dip them. Now I am using this Candy Quick, so Log House Candy Quick brand of melting chocolate or candy coating. I really like it. It melts really thin and just is a great dipping chocolate. But you can use whatever chocolate you want to do. And so you can make semi-sweet, like use semi-sweet chocolate chips and do like a semi-sweet Twix. You could do a milk chocolate Twix. You could do a dark chocolate Twix, white chocolate Twix. Use like your favorite Lindt chocolate bar or Ghirardelli, whatever you want to do. So you can do a lot of different variations if you want. I'm just gonna do this one for right now. And I'm just gonna melt this in the microwave. 30 seconds stir, 30 seconds stir until it's completely melted. You can also use the double boiler method on the stovetop. All right, the chocolate is nice and melted, very runny. That's what we want. If you are using something like chocolate chips, you'll probably want to use a couple of teaspoons of oil, vegetable oil, canola oil, coconut oil, and mix that in with the chocolate, and it'll make it much more runny or runnier and easier to dip. And now I take one of these out of the fridge. You want to do these one at a time. And so the remainder of these can just stay in the fridge and stay chilled. Otherwise, the caramel will get soft and it's just harder to cut and dip. And so what I'll do is just kind of pull apart the sides a little bit just to loosen this up. And it'll come right out. And then we'll do cookie side down. Do not put the caramel side down because it'll stick and get stuck to your cutting board. And then I have a knife right here and I just sprayed it lightly with some cooking spray. And then I'm just going to cut this in pieces. And then what I want to do is I want to dip these in the chocolate. So I'll take one of these pieces, I'll put it right there in the chocolate, and then I'll take a fork and just go underneath it. And let the excess drain. That's why I like using a fork. Just give it a little tap in your hand and that'll help it drain, and then just let it slide right off onto a sheet pan or cookie sheet lined with parchment paper. And when you are done dipping them, depending on the chocolate you use, that candy coating or that chocolate Candy Quick that I was using, by the time I'm done dipping them, most of them have already set. But if you need to, just put it in the fridge for about 15 minutes to allow the chocolate coating to set. And now they are ready to go. You can eat them just like this. You could also trim the edges at the bottom if you want with a knife. Also, if you want to get a little fancy, you can do some little white chocolate drizzles. Drizzle some white chocolate on top. And I usually will do a combination of flavors as well as designs. And there we go. Homemade Twix. Awesome. I'm going to grab one of these and show you what it looks like on the inside. Mmm. 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 I love these. Next up, homemade crunch bars. And now I'm going to start by melting my chocolate. I'm going to demonstrate it with my milk chocolate symphony bar. I also have the almond blueberry dark chocolate, and I also have semi-sweet chocolate chips. And now let's melt the chocolate. I'm going to just do it in the microwave. I normally will do the defrost setting, which is about 45 seconds on my microwave, and then stir, and then defrost setting again and stir. Or also you can do like 25 seconds on high and then stir, 25 seconds, stir until it's melted. Or you could do the double boiler method, which you take a small pot and you put about a cup of water in there, and you take your bowl. Normally it'll be a little bit bigger, so it sits like this. And then the steam from the hot water will heat up the bottom of the bowl and it'll gently melt the chocolate. That's the double boiler method. You can do that on the stovetop if you like. All right, the chocolate is melted. Also, I just want to mention, if you are going to use a glass bowl, this is a Pyrex bowl. It is microwave safe, but not all glass bowls are microwave safe, so just double check. And once the chocolate is melted, we will add in the Rice Krispies or crisp rice. I usually do a 1-to-1 ratio, so 1/2 cup of chocolate, or like a 4-ounce chocolate bar, or 4 ounces of chocolate chips, and then 1/2 cup of the crisp rice or Rice Krispies. And I don't want to stir like vigorously. You just want to come in here and just fold it all together, because if you stir vigorously, then you'll break up those Rice Krispies, and you don't want to do that. Pretty simple. I'm telling you, this is an awesome way to make your own homemade crunch bars. And now what we do, I have a pan here. This is a granola bar pan. I use this for candy bars as well. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna fill up the cavities with the chocolate. I should be able to get about 4 of these from this one batch. And so I'm just going to put in a scoop here. I'm just gonna do 1 scoop per bar first. And then I'll usually come in with like my silicone spatula and just kind of, or you can use the back of the spoon, just kind of push it down and then give it a good tap. And there we go. And that is ready to go in the fridge. I'm gonna fill up the rest of these with the other chocolates. All right, so I have all 3 of them done. This is the dark chocolate almond blueberry private selection brand chocolate. This was the milk chocolate symphony bar. These were the semi-sweet chocolate chips, and I purposely did a little bit more crisp rice in this one. You can tell it's more chunky looking, and I did that on purpose just to show what you can do. You could also use less crisp rice if you want. And now let's put these in the fridge for about 30 minutes so they can set up properly. One thing I want to note is I didn't temper the chocolate. And what happens if you don't temper the chocolate is if you leave the candy or the chocolate bar out at room temperature, it'll get really soft and sometimes melt on you depending on how warm your house is. But that's okay. I just normally store those candies in the refrigerator anyway, so it's not a big deal. But another thing you can use is you could use the chocolate candy melts, and those don't need to be tempered at all, and you can put those out at room temperature and they'll take a longer time for them to melt. All right, so let's put these in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes. After they have set, you can just come in here and just squeeze the sides of the pan here and just pop out the bar. Look at that, pretty cool. And on the bottom, nice and smooth. And there you go. We have a nice little crunch bar. This is one of the milk chocolate ones. And if I bite into it, look at that. The classic crunch bar center. Pretty awesome. And then for those of you who don't remember what they look like, or if you haven't seen one of these, I'm gonna just open it up and show you what these look like. It has their classic crunch symbol on there. And then on the bottom you can see the crisp rice. But it's very similar. This milk chocolate one, the classic one, tastes almost identical to the one that I made. Pretty awesome. These are a lot thinner also than the ones that I made. Next, homemade almond joys. I got my little food processor here, and I'm gonna add these coconut flakes. You can use whatever brand of coconut flakes that you want. And then we'll just blend this up, 15 to 30 seconds, just so it's nice and fine. Okay, and now you have a couple options. You can leave everything in here, the coconut, and then add your binder to it and blend it. But since it's gonna look a little nicer on camera, I'm gonna remove this and take this bowl, and we are gonna add these to the bowl. But normally I might just do everything in the food processor just to save, from cleaning up an extra bowl. And that was 7 ounces or 198 grams of coconut flakes, just a standard little package. Now we need 3 to 4 tablespoons of binder. And I like to just add, I'm gonna use sweetened condensed milk at this point. Let's add in about half of it. And then we wanna just mix this together. You don't have to use sweetened condensed milk if you don't want to. I already have some really handy, so I'm gonna use this. And then you can also come in here with hands. I'm using gloves, and we can just kind of knead it together. And what we want is for it to all stick together, but we don't want it to be too much. Okay, so you want it to be able to just squeeze it and have it stay together. Take a little bit of this. And now we want to form our shape. And you can make these as big as you want, but remember, Almond Joys have 2 almonds on the top. So we need room for 2 almonds. So you kind of press it together and make your shape. Like that. I switched to a silicone mat just so it's easier to see. All right, what it is, I put some melted chocolate in this bag. You can just melt it in the microwave or in the double boiler method over on the stovetop. And we're going to put little dots of chocolate where we want our almonds to be. If you just try to rest them on there, they're not going to stay. And now let's place these almonds right on top like that. All right, there we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the freezer, and we're going to freeze these for 30 to 45 minutes. That way they are firm enough to where we can dip them. Right now, if we try to dip them, they'll just fall apart. All right, so into the freezer, 30 to 45 minutes. Now it's time to melt the chocolate. I am using milk chocolate chips. You can use semi-sweet, dark, you can use white chocolate. You could use actually candy bars, like Hershey bars or Symphony bars or Cadbury bars. Or you could use just like that chocolate coating stuff. You normally use that for like almond bark. So whatever chocolate you want to use. Now I'm going to melt this in the microwave using bursts of 20, 30 seconds and then stirring until it's melted. You could also do the double boiler method on the stovetop. Also, I'm not going to be tempering this chocolate. I do have a video that shows you how to temper chocolate if you want, because I'm going to just store these in the refrigerator. And I have about 2.5 to 3 cups of chocolate. It's right around 2.5 cups, or I think it's like 490 grams, somewhere around there. It doesn't have to be exact. We just need it to be deep enough to where we can dip those bars. All right, here we go. I got some nice melted chocolate here. And if it's too thick, you can add a little bit of oil, a little bit of vegetable oil, a little bit of shortening if you want. Now we're gonna just take one of these and dip it right in there and cover this thing up with chocolate. Give it a little tap so the excess comes off. And right there. And then we just dip the rest of these. And you should be able to get 13 to 16 of these, depending on the size that you make them. These are fairly large. I love making them this large, and I got 13 of them. Once you have them completely dipped in the chocolate into the refrigerator, they go for about 20 to 30 minutes so that chocolate can firm up. And once the chocolate coating has firmed up, they are ready. There you go. Homemade Almond Joys. Super easy to make. These are better than store-bought, in my opinion. I'm gonna bite into one and show you what it looks like. Also, I wanna mention, you can trim the bottom if you want with a knife so they look a little bit nicer on the base, but I don't really care about that. Yeah. These are so good. Next, homemade Snickers. We need to begin by making the homemade nougat. And I love these homemade Snickers. They're super delicious. I think I like them even better than the real thing. All right, on to the nougat. What we want to start by doing is whipping up the egg white. Now, this recipe is much easier to make if you have a stand mixer, but I'm going to show you how to do it with a hand mixer. Also, you will need a candy thermometer or some kind of a thermometer for this. And now, let's just take our egg, just one large egg here. And we want to get just the white from this egg, so separate the yolk. And we'll just transfer the yolk back and forth between the shell. And then you can save this yolk and use it for something else if you like. Throw it in an omelet. Do whatever you want with it, okay? Let's go ahead and just start beating this egg white until we have nice stiff peaks. Okay, so then when you take the beaters out, you'll have little peaks on there and they won't fall over. That's what we mean by stiff peaks. And now we can set this aside for now. We need to do the sugar part of the nougat. And what we're gonna do is we have 2/3 cup of white granulated sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of water, and then 1/3 cup of corn syrup. We are going to heat this up and melt it to 255 to 260 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 124 to 128 Celsius. I have the heat set to medium heat. And now we don't have to constantly stir this at all. We're just gonna let it sit here and stir occasionally. And this part right here is gonna take somewhere between 6 and 10, 12 minutes, somewhere around there to get it to the right temperature. All right, we are there. And now we have the trickiest part of the nougat, and we are going to barely drizzle this hot sugar into the egg white just a little bit while we are mixing, okay? Okay, and then we're just gonna mix it for another about a minute or so. "30 seconds to a minute, doesn't have to be exact. So you can see why a stand mixer would come in really handy. All right, and now we want to work fairly quickly here. And I have these little bread loaf pans, and I like using these just because it comes out really well, really easy after the fact. And I want to put about 1/3 of each of this in here, evenly into each one of these. And I did spray these pans with cooking spray. It's pretty important. You want to spray the pans with cooking spray. And that is the nougat, okay? So the only complicated part is drizzling that hot sugar in at a slow pace. You can't just dump it all in, otherwise it'll completely ruin it. It'll cook the egg whites. Now our nougat is done. It's really important. We need to chill this nougat. So put it in the fridge for at least 4 hours. Sometimes I do it overnight before we can move on to the caramel step, okay? Into the fridge they go, again, about 4 hours or even overnight. Once our nougat has cooled, I left it in there overnight. I really want that nougat to be nice and firm. If it is really, really soft, even after over a night, when you press it, if it's really soft, it means that sugar probably wasn't hot enough. And so you really, really need to use a candy thermometer for that sugar to make sure it's at the right temperature, okay? And now I have caramel. This is about 30 of the individually wrapped Kraft caramels. And you can use homemade caramel. I have a really nice homemade caramel recipe here on my channel that I use for the caramel apples. So if you want to make the caramel from scratch, I would just half that caramel recipe on there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add about 1.5 tablespoons to 2 tablespoons of either heavy whipping cream, half and half, or just whole milk to my caramels. And then I'm going to melt this in the microwave on bursts of 25 to 30 seconds and then stir 30 seconds, 25 seconds, and then stir until it's nice and melted. You could also put this in a pot and do it on the stovetop over medium-low heat if you don't want to use the microwave. On to that step. And once the caramel is melted, I'm gonna add in my peanuts. This is 3/4 of a cup of lightly salted peanuts, and those were roasted ahead of time. So they just came that way roasted. And just add those to the caramel. Great. And then what we wanna do is we want to come over here to our nougat. And when you press on it, again, it should be firm. And then I'm just going to come in here and take some of this caramel and put it right on top of that nougat. Oops. And then we'll just spread it out. So it goes on the top here and covers the top. And then I'll do that with the rest of these. Okay, there we go. And now back into the fridge. These go for about 20 to 30 minutes. You just want the caramel to firm up a little bit so we can cut these up and then dip them in chocolate. On to that step. Once the caramel has set, it's time to cut them up and dip them in chocolate. So I have half of a bar of this candy coating from Kroger. It's just a cheap candy coating bar. And it's a half of one, so it's about 225 grams, or about a cup worth. And then I have a cup of Ghirardelli milk chocolate chips that I'm gonna add. Now you could use all chocolate chips if you want. You could use chocolate bars. It's totally up to you. I like to use a combination of these two, but there we go. And I'm gonna melt this in the microwave on bursts of 30 seconds and stir until it's nice and melted. You could also do this with a double boiler on the stovetop if you like. Caramel is kind of firm on top, and then I have that melted chocolate. It's nice and runny. What we want to do is we're going to take this out. We're going to do these one at a time. Leave the other ones in the fridge while we work with this, and just kind of pull it away from the sides. Kind of pop this out of here like that. And you notice I put a piece of parchment paper down. Okay. That way the nougat on the bottom won't stick. And then I just want to cut this. And it might squeeze a little bit on the bottom of the nougat. You could also do it on the caramel side down this way. Like that. So it doesn't squeeze the nougat. Just make sure you have parchment paper down, because that's going to make sure the caramel doesn't stick. If I just put this on the cutting board, that caramel might stick. Okay. Also on my knife, I lightly sprayed it with cooking spray. And then I'm going to take my chocolate. I'll take one of these and just put it nougat side down into the chocolate. And then just take a fork and put it underneath. Lightly tap it. And we'll just put it right here. Put it right there on a sheet pan lined with parchment paper or a silicone baking mat. Then once you're done dipping them, put them back in the fridge until the chocolate sets, probably 30 minutes or so. On to that step. And once the chocolate has set, we can eat them, or we could also trim off the edges. Like I'll take this one, and I am using a glove here. You can just trim off the edges like that if you want. Just to make it look a little bit nicer. Pretty awesome. And now I want to take one of these and cut into it and show you what it looks like in the center. And then look at that. Nougat on the bottom and caramel on the top. Really, really awesome. Next, homemade Snickers Crisper candy bars. Comes in this blue packaging like this. It tastes really good. Instead of nougat and peanuts, it's Rice Krispies and peanuts, or like a crisp rice with peanuts. and still has caramel and chocolate. For our tools and the ingredients, we have some kitchen spray. We have a 4x8 bread pan, which I have covered with aluminum foil. I have some corn syrup, but this is only an alternative to the marshmallows and butter. And if you do corn syrup, it's 3 tablespoons. I have a 1.5 cups of milk chocolate light cocoa candy wafers. I have alternative, instead of using these, you can use 7 ounces of milk chocolate, so just one giant Hershey chocolate bar. I have about 11 to 12 of these caramels, which equals about 3.5 ounces of caramel. I have 1 tablespoon of milk, 2/3 cup of Rice Krispies or crisp rice, 1 tablespoon of butter, 2/3 cup of unsalted peanuts, 1.25 cup of marshmallows. Now, like I said, if you want to do the corn syrup method, do not use the marshmallows or the butter. You just use 3 tablespoons of the corn syrup. So the first step is to create our binding agent. I decided to use the Rice Krispie Treat method, which is marshmallows and butter melted together, and then you add your peanuts and your crisp rice. Alternatively, like I mentioned earlier, you could use 3 tablespoons of corn syrup. Do not use both, use either or. So I'm going to melt my butter. I'm going to take my butter here. I'm going to go ahead and melt this in the microwave on bursts of 30 seconds. Stir, 30 seconds stir until it's all nice and melted. And then we'll go on to the next step, and then we'll just add our crisp rice and our peanuts and mix it all together. Okay, so once it's melted, we want to work fairly quickly. We'll add our peanuts and our crisp rice. And we'll go ahead and just mix that all together. Again, like you're making Rice Krispie Treats. And then we'll take our aluminum foil covered, and we'll spray it. Spray the aluminum foil with your kitchen spray, and we're going to just put our mixture right in there. Try to get it all that you can. And we want to spread it out. And then just take a piece of parchment paper and put it on top and push it down. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set this in the refrigerator and let it chill for about 20 minutes. Now, once you take it out of the fridge, we will go ahead and take off the top of our So now what we want to do is we want to take our caramel, and we are going to take our milk and add it to our caramel. And then we are going to melt our caramel in the microwave on bursts of 30 seconds. Stir 30 seconds until it's nice, completely melted and nice and creamy. And we're going to go ahead and just pour it all in there like this. We want to scrape all the sides as best as we can. Spread this out nice and even. Okay, and now we're going to let this set in the refrigerator, and we want it to set for about an hour. We need it to completely set up nice and firm for us. Now we want to melt our chocolate. I'm going to melt it in the microwave on high with bursts of 30 seconds. So 30 seconds and then stir, 30 seconds and stir until it is completely melted. I took this out of the fridge, and now what we want to do is cut it. So you can just lift it right out, and then we'll just peel back our foil. And then we want to place it caramel side up, otherwise the caramel will stick. And now we want to cut it. And what I like to do is I just make this into 8 pieces. And so I'll just cut in the middle here. But you can make them whatever sizes you want. I also sprayed my knife with kitchen spray just to make it so it cuts through a little easier. The caramel can stick a little bit sometimes. Okay, and now what we want to do is we want to just go ahead and dip these in the chocolate. Take it and cover it with chocolate and go under it with your fork and just wiggle it a little bit, and it'll drip off the excess, and place it on parchment paper.
once they are all dipped, put them in the fridge for 15 to 20 minutes so they can set completely. Time for me to dive into one of these.
Next, homemade Kit Kats. So this is a 2-ingredient Kit Kat bar. So first let's go ahead and prep our vanilla wafers. I have a couple of different flavors and different varieties here. I have strawberry, I have vanilla. These are both from the Walmart brand. Great value from Walmart. And then I have this other brand, and I'm just going to show you the difference between them. And then we'll take a wafer, just come down here and cut just like that, okay? Cut it in half. And then I also want to do some strawberry ones. So now what we need to do is I have some candy melts. This is a light cocoa candy melt, and we're going to melt this in the microwave. I'm going to do it on bursts of 30 seconds. 30 seconds, stir, 30 seconds, stir, 20 seconds until it's nice and melted. You could use chocolate candy bars, like Hershey bars. You could use whatever kind of chocolate you want. Dark chocolate, white chocolate. Candy melts are nice because if you're going to set these out for like a party or something, the candy melts are great because they won't melt at room temperature as easily as normal chocolate will, unless you temper that normal chocolate. All right, and then once we have our chocolate melted, what we'll do is we'll just take one of our wafers, and I'll use like a double combination of a spoon and a fork. Just take it out. Let the excess drizzle. That's why a fork works really nice. Drop it on out down there. When you're all done, what you can do is just put this in the refrigerator for about 20-30 minutes and they will be ready to go. Also, what you could do, like I did with this one, is put some chocolate in the middle between the two, and that way they will be connected, kind of like a Kit Kat bar. And then when they come out of the fridge, they will look like this. And what you can do is you can go ahead and trim the sides down if you like. I will grab one, show you what it looks like on the inside. Next, the iconic Dubai chocolate bar. Now we are going to begin with the design. So I have my mold here, and you can use any deep chocolate mold. You need it to be kind of deep because the filling takes up space. And I just got this online and they called it a Dubai chocolate mold, and it's pretty large. And then I have some different colors here of candy melts, some bright yellow, some bright pink, and I'm going to use some white. And I'm just going to melt these, do it in the microwave, burst of 20-30 seconds until they're melted, and then we'll do the designs. And I'm just going to do a little zigzag like this. Now we'll do some yellow, and then finally we will do a little bit of pink. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to put this in the fridge and just let that chocolate set. Next we need to toast the kadaifi, and the brand, it's totally up to you. I just get this kind because it's already dried and shredded for me. We are going to toast this in a skillet with a little bit of butter. I got 3 tablespoons of butter here. This is 100 grams or 1 2/3 cup of the kadaifi. And this is just shredded phyllo dough. I have the heat set to right around medium. And I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of butter here. And you can use salted or unsalted butter. I am using unsalted. Now I'm going to put that kadaifi right in there. And then we're just going to kind of just keep stirring until this is nice and toasted and lightly golden brown like this. All right, this is ready to go. And then I'm going to transfer it to this bowl here. And then we add the star of the dish, which is pure pistachio paste. And there's a lot of variety of brands that you can get. This is just the kind that I get. It has the greenest color I find, at least for what I can find. And then I'm gonna make sure to stir this. And we'll just pour that in there. So we need about 190 grams or 3/4 of a cup, which is about one of these jars. And then also 3 tablespoons of tahini. Now let's just give this a mix. And there we have it. And now we need to melt the chocolate. I'm gonna melt this and also temper the chocolate. And so I have 2 bowls here, and I am going to keep about a third of it. And this is right around 400 grams of chocolate, which is about 2 cups. So I'm gonna keep about a third of it, and we're gonna use this as seeding for the tempering. And I'm just using milk chocolate this time, but you can use dark chocolate as well. And you don't have to use chocolate chips. You can use chocolate bars if you want as well. Here I am at the stovetop. I have the heat set to medium, and I'm gonna do the double boiler method. I have a pot with about 1 inch deep of water, and then my bowl, a Pyrex bowl, or you can use a metal bowl. And then you wanna make sure that the bottom of the bowl does not touch the water. And then what's gonna happen as the water heats up and steam will hit the bottom of the bowl and gently melt the chocolate. And then I'm gonna melt this and heat it to 105 Fahrenheit, which is 40 degrees Celsius. And then if you are going to do dark chocolate, you wanna heat it up higher, right around 122 Fahrenheit or 50 degrees Celsius. And then eventually the chocolate chips will start to melt. And just make sure to keep stirring. All right, there we go. Now just remove it from the heat. And then what we do is we add these other chocolate chips here, and we're gonna just keep stirring, and then they're gonna, as those melt, they're gonna bring the temperature down. All right, once we get down to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 26 Celsius, what we need to do is we're gonna need to heat this back up to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 30 degrees Celsius, and then we'll be ready to use it. And that is how you temper chocolate. Back over to the stovetop we go. And you do have a little bit of leeway here when tempering, about 5 degrees. And so if you do not have a thermometer, you can just heat the chocolate up until it completely melts, and then it's about the temperature of like a hot tub or jacuzzi, so that's about 105, and then let it cool down until it's room temperature, and you can just put your knuckle on there and it's nice room temperature. And there we go. That chocolate is tempered and ready to go. And also, if you look, it'll be nice and shiny. So now we're going to take our chocolate and pour it in the mold here. Put a little bit in there, and then we're going to just spread this out nice and evenly. Go up the sides. You can also just pour it all in and then tilt this all around. Okay, and now into the refrigerator this goes for about 5-6 minutes, just so we can get that to firm up a little bit. And then once that firms up a little bit, we can put in our filling. And we don't want to fill it up too much. We want to make sure to leave room for the chocolate on the top. So we'll just spread this out. Okay? Smells so good. And then we want to cover the top with more chocolate. Then I'll come in here with my cake spatula. Spread it out. And then into the fridge this goes for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just so everything sets up nicely. All right, time to check these out. They've set. Just pull out the edges a little bit. Oh my gosh, look at this. Look at that. Isn't that cool? And then I'm gonna do the break here. Look at that. So awesome. And that is how you make the viral Dubai chocolate bar. Time for me to dive into this. Oh yeah. And finally, homemade Reese's. These aren't really a bar, but I had to include them. All right, first we're gonna start with our peanut butter, or you can use almond butter, cashew butter, pretty much any nut butter you can make these with. And what I did is I have a half cup here, and this does not have to be exact. If you find you only have a fourth of a cup of peanut butter, or if you wanna use more, just use that. This does not have to be exact. And I'm using the creamy kind. You could use the chunky kind as well. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take about a half teaspoon of butter, softened. This is not necessary. If you don't have any to use, don't use it. You can leave it out. I just like to add it. And then I'm gonna go ahead with my spoon here. Just go ahead and mix the butter in. Now we're just gonna start adding our confectioner sugar or powdered sugar. I have about a cup here. You may or may not use that much. You may need some more, you may need more, you may need less. What we want to do is we want to get the consistency of this to be like Play-Doh. Okay? I can tell this is too sticky already, just by the looks of it. Add some more. And you could use a fork for this. I just always use a spoon. All right, so this is kind of more what we want it to be. So make sure you have clean hands. You're gonna wanna take some of it and be able to form it, shape it. See how I can shape it in my hands, really nice? And you wanna make it a piece about like that, okay, about that big. And now what we wanna do is we want to melt our chocolate. I have two different types of chocolate here. I have semi-sweet chocolate chips with a special dark Hershey's bar for one kind. And then I also have these milk chocolate candy melts. Also, where you might want to use candy melts more often is if you're going to take them to a party and they're going to be sitting out at room temperature, then you want to use candy melts because it doesn't have any cocoa butter in it and it won't melt as easily or get soft as easy at room temperature. Otherwise, with normal chocolate, you have to temper it. I'm just gonna melt these in the microwave on burst of 30 seconds, stir, 30 seconds, stir, 15 seconds until nice and melted. So I'm gonna start with the candy melts and then I'll show you what we do from there. What we do is you just come in here and get about a teaspoon, half a teaspoon worth, and you're just gonna put some in the bottom, just like that. Just like that. And then I'm just gonna shake it a little bit so it flattens out. Not necessary, really. And then you take your little piece of peanut butter and just go ahead and drop it right down on there and give it a little push and get some more. And you can put more peanut butter mixture or less if you want, depending on how big you want to make these. All right, and then once you have all of them filled up like that, just come back in with your chocolate, do a little dollop. Okay, and then come in here with your spoon and just make sure the whole tops are all covered. You don't have any peanut butter showing. You could have the peanut butter showing if you want. Okay, those are ready to go. All right, now I just got to do the semi-sweet and dark chocolate. Now you just put this in the fridge for 25 to 30 minutes until the chocolate sets, and then you're ready to go. Super easy. I'm gonna grab one here, peel back the, look at that. Really cool. Take a bite out of it. Mmm. So yummy. I hope you enjoyed these awesome candy bar recipes. Let me know which ones are your favorites. All the written recipes for these candy bars will be down in the description box. Let me know which ones are your favorites. Take care and happy baking and cooking, everyone.